Ever heard that saying, the past is a foreign country? Well, today we're kind of taking a trip back to the 1920s,
Okay.
a time that might seem both familiar and strangely alien,
Oh,
It's the era of flapper dresses, jazz music,
right.
and a booming economy that felt like it would last forever.
Yeah.
But like any good story, there's a twist.
Sure.
Beneath the surface of all that glitz and glamour, a dark undercurrent of corruption was brewing,
Yeah.
especially in the halls of power.
Right. And it's especially fascinating because we tend to, I think, romanticize the Roaring Twenties,
Yeah,
focusing on those cultural shifts and the economic boom.
for sure.
But you're right. There's a darker side to the story, and it's one that often gets overlooked.
Definitely. Now, you asked us to dig into the political landscape of that era,
Okay.
specifically the scandals that rocked President Warren G. Harding's administration.
All right.
So we've got some excerpts from Wondery's American History Tellers podcast. And let me tell you, this is some juicy stuff.
Yeah.
It's like a real-life political thriller.
It really is. Harding campaigned on a promise of a return to normalcy after the upheaval of World War I. People just craved stability.
Makes sense.
And his message definitely resonated. He was personally likable, but perhaps not quite cut out for the demands of the presidency.
Yeah, seems like he relied heavily on his cabinet, which, as we know, included some brilliant minds like Herbert Hoover,
Right.
Andrew Mellon.
Yep.
But then there was the other side of the coin, his old pals from Ohio, the infamous Ohio gang.
Yeah, and that's where things get interesting, or should we say, scandalous.
Oh, yeah.
These weren't just folks offering friendly advice. They saw an opportunity to leverage their connections for personal gain. Their operations were centered around a house on K Street in Washington, D.C.,
Okay.
a place that became notorious for its less-than-legal activities.
Oh, wow.
We're talking poker games fueled by illegal alcohol.
Wow.
And perhaps most importantly, a whole lot of bribery.
So imagine this. You're a clerk working for a district court judge,
Okay.
and you find yourself at one of these K Street poker games.
Hmm.
You're rubbing shoulders with the likes of Jess Smith, Attorney General Harry Daugherty's right-hand man.
Yeah.
It all seems like a casual gathering, but there's a lot more going on beneath the surface, right?
Yeah. The podcast details how these gatherings were less about friendly games of cards and more about a system of influence peddling.
Oh, interesting.
In one instance, this clerk we're picturing is approached with a proposition
Okay.
and offered to essentially buy a judgeship for his boss.
Wait, so they were just openly buying and selling judgeships. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
It seems like such blatant corruption. Did nobody bat an eye?
Well, it speaks to the culture of the time. Harding himself was known for his loyalty and tendency to trust those close to him,
Okay.
perhaps to a fault.
Yeah.
He may have been genuinely unaware of the extent of their activities, or perhaps he simply chose to look the other way.
That's a good point. It's easy to judge with the benefit of hindsight,
Yeah.
but I guess we have to consider the context of the time.
Right.
Still, it's hard to fathom the audacity of some of these schemes.
Yeah.
The podcast goes on to detail a whole slew of scandals,
Okay.
starting with Charles Forbes, the head of the Veterans Bureau.
Right. Forbes was essentially siphoning off taxpayer money meant for veterans' hospitals and medical supplies.
Oh, no.
He rigged contracts, sold supplies for pennies on the dollar, and pocketed millions while veterans struggled.
Wow.
It's estimated that he squandered around $200 million,
Good heavens.
an astronomical sum even by today's standards.
It's truly infuriating that someone would exploit veterans in such a way.
It is.
And then there's this scandal that became synonymous with the Harding administration,
Uh-huh.
the Teapot Dome scandal.
Yes.
It involves Interior Secretary Albert Fall, a man apparently known for his cowboy hats, and a rather flexible approach to ethics.
This one is particularly intriguing because it involves valuable government oil reserves, specifically those located at Teapot Dome in Wyoming and Elk Hills in California. Fall, through a series of maneuvers, took control of these reserves and then leased them to his friends in the oil industry, naturally for a hefty personal profit.
So it's not just poker games and shady deals for judgeships. We're talking about national resources being exploited for personal gain.
Exactly.
The podcast mentions that journalist Carl McGee noticed Fall's sudden wealth, especially the lavish upgrades to his ranch, and started digging deeper. It's like something out of a detective novel.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a testament to the importance of investigative journalism.
Right.
McGee wasn't just chasing rumors. He meticulously followed the money trail, uncovering evidence of hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes and no-interest loans funneled to Fall.
Wow.
His work was instrumental in bringing the scandal to light.
It's incredible how one person's curiosity and determination can have such a huge impact.
It really is.
So with all these scandals swirling around him, how did Harding react? Did he ever acknowledge what was happening?
Well, there's a rather telling anecdote from the podcast.
Okay.
Apparently, when someone warned Harding about Fall's questionable dealings, Harding responded by saying that if Fall wasn't honest, then he wasn't fit to be president. Yeah, it's a statement that really reveals a lot about Harding's character, both his loyalty and perhaps a certain naivete, right?
Yeah.
It also kind of highlights the central irony of his presidency. His desire for a return to normalcy was ultimately overshadowed by the extraordinary level of corruption within his own administration.
Yeah, you're right. It's quite a paradox.
Yeah.
But before we move on from the scandals, we have to talk about Attorney General Harry Daugherty and his close associate, Jess Smith.
Right.
The K Street house wasn't just a hub for bribery. It seems they were involved in all sorts of shady dealings.
That's right. They were accused of selling pardons, granting immunity to criminals, essentially using their positions for personal enrichment. Smith even had a rather crass jingle, "My God, how the money rolls in," which speaks volumes about their attitude towards their illicit activities.
It's almost comical if it weren't so serious.
Yeah.
But this story takes a dark turn, doesn't it? What happened to Jess Smith?
He was found dead in Daugherty's apartment.
Oh, no.
Officially ruled a suicide, but the circumstances were suspicious, and rumors of a cover-up persisted for years. It added another layer of intrigue and scandal to an already tarnished administration.
It's like something out of a Hollywood movie, but unfortunately, this was real life with real consequences.
Yeah.
So amidst all this corruption,
Yeah.
how did Harding manage to maintain his popularity? He was still relatively well-liked when he died in 1923, wasn't he?
That's a really important point. Harding's presidency coincided with a period of significant economic prosperity.
Right.
People were enjoying the fruits of a booming economy, indulging in new consumer goods, embracing jazz music, and generally feeling a sense of optimism after the war. The scandals, while certainly known in some circles, didn't really capture widespread public attention until after Harding's death.
So it seems the good times, at least for some, were able to overshadow the political shenanigans happening behind the scenes.
Right.
Makes you wonder, how much do we really know about what goes on behind closed doors, even today?
That's a question worth pondering. But back to the 1920s,
Okay.
Harding's sudden death while on a speaking tour out west ushered in a new era with Vice President Calvin Coolidge at the helm.
Right.
Did this change in leadership mark a departure from the corruption of the previous administration?
Well, Coolidge, nicknamed Silent Cal for his reserved demeanor, projected an image of traditional values and integrity.
Okay.
He distanced himself from the scandals of the Harding era and continued the pro-business policies that were fueling the economic boom.
Right.
But did this so-called Coolidge prosperity benefit everyone? Our outline suggests that we dig a little deeper into the economic landscape of the Roaring Twenties.
That's a crucial point. While Coolidge's policies did contribute to economic growth, the benefits weren't evenly distributed.
I see.
Certain sectors, like agriculture, actually struggled during this time.
Oh, really?
European agriculture was recovering after the war,
Okay.
which led to decreased demand for American crops.
Makes sense.
Farmers faced declining incomes and mounting debt, a stark contrast to the prosperity enjoyed by those in industries like manufacturing and finance.
It's a reminder that even during periods of economic boom, there are often winners and losers.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of the Roaring Twenties.
Sure.
But we have to remember that not everyone was experiencing the same level of prosperity.
Right.
Speaking of excitement, the 1920s witnessed an incredible surge in consumerism.
Yeah.
New technologies and mass production made a whole range of goods accessible to everyday Americans.
Right. Automobiles, radios, washing machines.
Right.
These became symbols of the modern age.
Absolutely. And the rise of mass production and easy access to credit played a huge role in this consumer revolution.
Yeah.
Suddenly, people could afford things that were previously out of reach.
Right.
And advertisers were quick to capitalize on this new consumer culture.
Yeah, they used all sorts of tactics. Some quite innovative, others bordering on manipulative to convince people that they needed the latest and greatest products.
I remember reading about those Listerine ads that claimed, often a bridesmaid, but never a bride,
Right.
implying that bad breath was the reason women were single.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how they managed to link mouthwash to social success.
It's a classic example of how advertisers tapped into people's insecurities and aspirations to sell products.
Right.
And let's not forget Bruce Barton,
Oh, yeah.
the ad man who famously compared Jesus to the ultimate salesman.
That's right. In his best-selling book, The Man Nobody Knows, he argued that businesses could learn from Christ's example of effective communication and persuasion.
Exactly.
It's a rather audacious comparison, but it resonated with the times.
It did, and it speaks to the growing influence of advertising in shaping not just consumer choices, but also perceptions of success and even spirituality.
So it seems the Roaring Twenties was a time of both economic and cultural transformation.
Yeah.
But what about the role of technology in all of this? I think we have to talk about the automobile, which played a pivotal role in shaping the decade.
Absolutely. Henry Ford's Model T revolutionized transportation, making cars affordable for the average person.
Okay.
His assembly line production methods were groundbreaking, allowing him to churn out a new car every 10 seconds at his Rouge River plant.
Wow, that's incredible. But Ford was also a complex figure, wasn't he?
Indeed, he was a visionary entrepreneur,
Hmm.
but he also held some controversial views, including anti-Semitism and opposition to alcohol.
Right.
It's a reminder that historical figures are rarely entirely good or bad.
Yeah.
They're products of their time with all its complexities.
That's an important point. We shouldn't shy away from acknowledging the flaws of historical figures,
Right.
even as we recognize their contributions.
Exactly. And while the automobile brought about tremendous changes, it also brought new anxieties and challenges.
Like what?
Teenagers could suddenly escape parental supervision, leading to concerns about changing social mores.
Okay.
Traffic accidents became a major problem as the number of cars on the road skyrocketed.
It's interesting how new technologies often trigger moral panics and unforeseen consequences.
Yeah.
But despite the concerns, the allure of the automobile was undeniable.
Right.
And soon, Ford faced a formidable competitor, General Motors.
GM, under the leadership of Alfred Sloan, took a different approach than Ford.
Oh, really?
Instead of focusing on affordability,
Yeah.
they emphasized style, choice, and the concept of planned obsolescence.
Ah, yes, the birth of the annual model change.
Exactly.
It was a brilliant marketing strategy that convinced people they needed to upgrade their cars regularly to keep up with the latest trends.
Exactly. GM poured millions into advertising, promoting the idea that owning the newest model was a sign of success and sophistication. And it worked. Ford saw his sales decline while GM surged ahead.
But amidst all this consumer frenzy, there were signs that things might be a little too good to be true. The Florida real estate boom, for example, turned into a spectacular bust.
It's a classic case of speculation and easy credit leading to unsustainable growth.
Yeah.
People were buying up land in Florida hoping to get rich quick,
Okay.
but when the bubble burst,
Yeah.
many were left with worthless properties and mountains of debt.
It sounds like a cautionary tale, a reminder that unchecked enthusiasm and speculation can have disastrous consequences.
Indeed, and unfortunately, the Florida real estate crash was just a prelude to the even bigger economic disaster that lay ahead, the Great Depression.
So we've got this booming economy, new technologies changing the way people live, and a whole lot of spending going on. But as you mentioned, this party couldn't last forever.
Sadly, no. The Florida real estate bust was a canary in the coal mine. It exposed the vulnerabilities of an economic system built on speculation and easy credit. Those same factors, coupled with a stock market increasingly detached from the real economy, would ultimately contribute to the crash of 1929 and the Great Depression.
We were talking earlier about how not everyone benefited equally from the prosperity of the Roaring Twenties. The struggles of farmers are one example, but were there other signs of trouble brewing beneath the surface?
Absolutely. While some enjoyed unprecedented wealth, there was a growing gap between the rich and the poor. Many people were living beyond their means, relying on credit to purchase consumer goods. This created a fragile economic foundation.
And the stock market was becoming like a house of cards.
Precisely. People were buying stocks on margin, essentially gambling with borrowed money. This inflated prices and created a bubble that was bound to burst.
And when it did, the consequences were devastating.
The Great Depression was a period of immense hardship. Widespread unemployment, bank failures, and poverty gripped the nation. It was a stark contrast to the exuberance of the Roaring Twenties.
It's amazing how quickly things can change. One minute you're dancing the Charleston, the next you're standing in bread lines.
It's a reminder that economic cycles are a reality. Periods of boom and bust have been a recurring theme throughout history.
So what can we learn from all of this? What are the big picture lessons from the Roaring Twenties and its aftermath?
I think one key takeaway is the importance of responsible government and ethical leadership. The Harding administration's scandals remind us that power, if left unchecked, can be easily abused. Transparency and accountability are crucial both in government and in business.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We also see the need for a more balanced and sustainable economic system. The Roaring Twenties showed us that unrestrained speculation and easy credit can lead to disastrous consequences.
Right. We need policies that promote equitable growth and protect against systemic risks. It's about finding a balance between encouraging innovation and entrepreneurship while also safeguarding against excessive risk-taking and reckless speculation.
And what about the role of individuals? What can we as citizens learn from this era?
I think it's crucial to be informed and engaged in the political process. Hold our leaders accountable, demand transparency, and don't be afraid to question the status quo. We can't just sit back and assume things will always work out. We have a responsibility to shape the future we want.
That's such an important point. It's easy to get caught up in our own lives and forget about the bigger picture. But history shows us that we all have a role to play in shaping a just and equitable society.
And finally, I think this era reminds us that history is full of complexities and contradictions. The Roaring Twenties was a time of both great progress and great turmoil. It's important to look beyond the surface and examine the nuances, the different perspectives, and the unintended consequences of even the most well-intentioned actions.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. Thanks for guiding us through this fascinating deep dive into the Roaring Twenties. It's been a wild ride full of both dazzling highs and sobering lows.
It's been my pleasure. Exploring the past helps us understand the present and perhaps even navigate the future a little bit better.
And for our listeners out there, if this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, we encourage you to check out Wondery's American History Tellers podcast for even more in-depth explorations of this fascinating era. There's always more to learn.
And remember, history isn't just about dates and names. It's about understanding the forces that have shaped our world, learning from the triumphs and mistakes of those who came before us, and using those insights to build a better future.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.